What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and this will be the last topic for today. I'm going to try and get through this article as fast as I possibly can. It's a bit lengthy. It's an article written by Omar Kelly, who, if you guys know me, in my opinion of him, he's usually a fucking clown, because he will say some things that are really smart and accurate and based in facts and statistics and logic and reason, and then will completely contradict himself literally in the very next sentence. So, he's kind of an idiot to me, but he has an interesting take here, and on the surface, it seems like he could be right, but we'll have to see. And his take is that the Dolphins have talent to double last year's win total. So he believes the Dolphins have enough talent on this roster to get to 10 wins. So let's see what he has to say. The Miami Dolphins surprisingly won 5 games in 2019 despite the organization intentionally sabotaging its own roster, including Brian Flores, who admitted he had a hand in every single one of the transactions that they made. So you can't just say that it was the front office that dismantled the team. That responsibility also has to fall on the shoulders of Brian Flores. Additionally, there is tons of evidence to show that they put the team in the worst possible positions in a lot of situations, with play calling, the use of timeouts and challenges, with the way that they used personnel on the field, and then with guys that they decided to mysteriously put on the inactives list, and so on and so forth. So there's that. Week after week, the Dolphins would experiment with their roster, which began the season with a purge of several proven veterans. For much of the season, the Dolphins utilized players that were waiver wire pickups or signed off another team's practice squad. Absolutely true. Barely practicing with their new team before playing on Sunday. All that is absolutely true and definitely plays into why the season sucked last year. Absolutely. As a result, the Dolphins struggled mightily in several areas, including the running game, offensive line, pass rush, and stopping the run. Yet somehow, Coach Brian Flores and journeyman Ryan Fitzpatrick managed to deliver a handful of wins for the rebuilding franchise. Pause. Not Brian Flores. If you watched my post-game videos and stuff last year, there were a couple times in which they got some damn good credit and deserved it. Most notably in the Patriots win in Foxborough. Okay, and so I'm fair. When they deserve it, they get it. But again, there was tons of evidence starting from the intentional teardown of the roster to the experimentation every week, because Brian Flores has a say in that. What do you mean? You think he doesn't have a say in? I mean, look, he fired his offensive line coach a week into training camp because they wouldn't play Michael Dieter and Shaq Calhoun. And then when we got to the season, they left Dieter in, even though he was complete trash the entire season, but then mysteriously would put Shaq Calhoun on the inactives list, even though he proved to be one of our better offensive linemen. And then he fired his offensive line in the offseason this season. So, okay. I mean, if you think it was Brian Flores that mysteriously got us, or miraculously got us to that, no. I think it's all because Ryan Fitzpatrick has a lot to do with it. I definitely underestimated his leadership ability and his moxie and his fight and his passion, and that certainly helped to motivate the other guys, but it was all the players. It was all the players on the field. Ryan Fitzpatrick for being a good leader, and then the other players on the team for buying into him as their leader, and then also wanting to make sure that they prove themselves and put out good film, so that way when they a lot of them inevitably get cut this offseason, like a lot of the guys that we've seen most recently, DeLance Turner, Samaje Perine, we saw Gerald Willis, that we were expecting to be, a part of this team, a bunch of guys that we were expecting to come in and, be carryovers from the waiver wire practice squad expansion team that we had last year were cut. So they were trying to play for their careers and their paychecks and the guy behind center more than it was for the organization and the bullshit franchise and the leadership that we have, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's how I evaluate the situation. It makes you wonder what Flores, a Bill Belichick protege, and Fitzpatrick, a 15-year veteran, can do with a vastly improved roster. Okay, pause right there again, because what does a Bill Belichick protege have anything to do with it? Obviously, he says that because, Bill Belichick's the greatest, and so he must be great, right? Except Bill Belichick didn't even think that he was ready to take on the defensive coordinator title and all of the responsibility that comes with that. Hence why he was still a position coach, but only had play calling duties before he left the Patriots. And if you look at all of Bill Belichick's disciples, almost none of them are having any kind of success or have. Matt Patricia's been doing terrible with the Lions and could be fired after this season if he doesn't get it fucking right. Mike Vrabel's doing good, so there's that. Okay. But he's making good decisions, like, let's say, bring in Ryan Tannehill to replace Marcus Mariota and get them to the AFC Championship game. But then you have, I don't know, Bill O'Brien, who's a fucking moron and who's going to drive the Texans into the ground with the decision making that he, does. And I think he's been the primary reason why the Texans haven't vaulted themselves up into a top contender each year. And so, look, I mean, his disciples, Bill Belichick's disciples, their records after leaving New England are not very good. So what are you trying to prove by saying that? And Ryan Fitzpatrick, the 15-year veteran, well, Ryan Fitzpatrick's had some pretty solid rosters before in his past, but he's been a very up and down player himself. So I don't know what you're trying to prove by those. That's, to me, not really any kind of like majorly motivating factor. Anyway, the Dolphins' addition of 11 free agents and 11 draft picks may be one of the best offseason overhauls in recent memory. Okay, but they have to prove it before they can be given that. There is absolutely nothing to suggest. And even when you look at like the free agents they brought in, they're not like all that great, but they got paid like they were the best thing out there. So we'll see how it plays out. With Flores and general manager Chris Greer assembling a solid nucleus in the second year of the team's rebuilding effort. On paper, is it going to translate? I don't know. I have my concerns. Miami's roster, which resembled a slice of Swiss cheese during Miami's 59-10 season-opening loss to the Baltimore Ravens in September, has been greatly improved with nearly every position being upgraded. Theoretically. He's saying it definitively, like it's unquestionably going to translate into 10 wins plus next season, or this season. Okay, prove it. The Dolphins have added much-needed depth to every unit except tight end, where the only offseason addition was Michael Roberts, a second-year veteran who was claimed off waivers, which again is a huge theme for the Dolphins, even with this team. Miami added a young quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa, who should inject hope into the veins of the fan base once his surgically repaired hip fully heals. Pause right there. Should, and it certainly has for the vast majority of the fan base, but also he says once his surgically hip fully heals. So are you saying, Omar Kelly, that you don't think that his hip has been fully healed yet? And if that's the case, if the Dolphins play him at all this season, is that a smart idea? That's interesting. I wish I could ask him myself. And he is able to compete with Fitzpatrick for the starting spot. The Dolphins also acquired a pair of veteran running backs in Jordan Howard, who has averaged 1,133 total yards the last 4 seasons, and Matt Breida, who has averaged 4.9 yards a carry on his 381 attempts. Both have accomplished plenty in their brief careers and still have a lot to prove. But Breida came from the 49ers, who have been crushing it the past few seasons, so there's that. And he's coming to a trash team as of right now who is only improved theoretically because they haven't actually proven anything yet. And Jordan Howard, I am blanking on where we got him from, but he has had a solid performance. He hasn't been a world beater, but he has had solid performance. But also, if you just look at last year for, comparison, every other team almost was better than us. So there's that. Devontae Parker, who produced his first 1,000-yard receiving season, and tight end Mike Gesicki, coming off a breakout season, will get a second chance to prove they can carry the offense. Well, that is true. They definitely will have a lot to prove this season. And the return of a healthy Preston Williams, Albert Wilson, and Jakeem Grant should allow the Dolphins to turn up the volume on the offense. That's true, should, theoretically, and I really like Albert Wilson and Jakeem Grant, and I actually do like the upside of Preston Williams quite a lot. And that's why I believed that wide receiver was definitely one of the deepest positions that we had on the offense and the whole team in general, even before the draft and free agency. And so, but all of those guys, all of them, have significant injury histories. And so, we'll see if they can stay healthy and then actually produce. That should benefit Chan Gailey, who came out of retirement to serve as Miami's offensive coordinator. Should. Again, will it? We'll have to see. But most importantly, the free agent signings of Eric Flowers, who I believe is going to prove to be an overpaid player, Ted Karras, who I actually really did like that signing, just straight out, and the draft selections of Austin Jackson in the first round, who I believe was a reach, and I certainly would have taken somebody totally different, and Robert Hunt, who I would have taken Josh Jones over personally in the third. He was picked in the second, and Solomon Kidley in the third round should bolster the offensive line, which needed a massive overhaul. Well, again, we'll have to wait and see. And up to this point, the Brian Flores, Chris Greer, Marvin Allen, Reggie McKenzie, and Stephen Ross regime has been pretty flat out terrible in their player evaluation to this point. I mean, it's just true. It's just true. It just is. If you look at all of the players that they brought in to what they've produced, how they've produced for us to this point, and then all of the players that they brought in and then released because they've said, well, we thought this guy might be a help to us, but really isn't. So when you look at all of that, the list of players that have been failed evaluations is far greater to this point than the list of players that have been, hits, including, let's say, pretty much their entire draft class from last season and their first round pick from last season. So I don't exactly have a lot of hope until they prove it that their selections this time around are really going to get it done. I mean, again, Michael Dieter was complete trash. Okay, well, let's see what happens. By adding 5 potential starters on the offensive line, the Dolphins, pause right there. By adding 5 potential starters on the offensive line, but there are only 5 starters. That's the entire offensive line. So you've completely reshaped your entire offensive line with almost an entirely new coaching staff, almost an entirely new team yet again. You're not really able to do much on the field work probably this offseason. There are a lot of issues. A lot of these guys have injury history. Some of them seem to be reaches. There are all of these things that when you put all of these factors together, don't exactly lead to good projected results. But and all new systems, right, et cetera, et cetera. So, they gotta fucking prove it, man. Who averaged just 19.1 points per game last season, are hopeful that will be the building block for delivering a respectable offense. It has to be the building block of any respectable offense, and again, prove it. On defense, the only major loss was Pro Bowl safety Rashad Jones, who was released this offseason and remains unsigned. While it won't be easy to replicate the playmaking abilities that Jones exhibited over the past decade, the Dolphins added 3 young safeties, Brandon Jones, Clayton Fejedelem, and Kevon Frazier, who will compete with Eric Rowe, Adrian Colbert, and Stephen Parker to replace Jones as the safety paired with Bobby McCain. Honestly, that safety room still very much concerns me, and I think that will be an Achilles heel for the secondary in particular. Miami also added one of the top free agents, signing Dallas Cowboys standout Byron Jones to one of the largest deals ever given to a cornerback. If paired with a healthy Xavier Howard, who missed 11 games last year because of a knee injury, the Dolphins could possess the best cornerback duo in the NFL. Could, and people have talked about that a lot, but again, major injury concerns with a lot of these guys, in particular Xavier Howard. Bobby McCain at the safety position. Again, that whole position is very concerning to me. Byron Jones appears to be, a guy who is pretty good in coverage, but can't fucking turn the ball, get turnovers to save his life. And then the first round corner that they took seems to be a carbon copy of that guy. Okay, whatever. Okay. The additions of veteran defenders like Shaq Lawson, Emmanuel Ogbah, Kyle Van Noy, Landon Roberts, and Kamu Grugier-Hill, all of which I believe are overpaid for the production that they've proven to be able to produce and what I believe we will get for them, but we'll see. And draftees Noah Igbenogene, Raekwon Davis, Jason Strourbridge, and Curtis Weaver should also help Miami's defense, which ranked 30th last year in yards at 397.8 per game and last in points per game at 30.9. We'll see. Theoretically, you would think, and again, on paper, perhaps. pair them with the improvement Miami should get from Christian Wilkins. I mean, it's an assumption that you just don't know. Well, you hope, right? But you don't know. Christian Wilkins, Devon Gottschall, Jerome Baker, Vince Beagle, Raekwon McMillan, Andrew Van Ginkel, Nick Needham, McCain, and Rowe in their second season in Flores' defense. And the days of the Dolphins' defense being pushed around might be over because their roster finally has talent again. Prove it. And this isn't the type of talent that barely hangs onto a roster spot like last year. That's because, I mean, that's a super low bar though, dude. Super low bar, okay? Super low bar. I mean, like, if that's your point of optimism, then, okay. So if Flores managed to win 5 games with inferior talent in 2019, why can't he pull off a 10-win season with an overhauled roster this year? Well, I've given you plenty of reasons and examples of why it could fail. Again, it is up to this coaching staff and this front office and this regime to prove me wrong and prove that the choices that they have made and the decisions that they have made are right. And again, they will not get credit from me until they prove it. And look, just because apparently I have to always say things in advance, even if they do somehow manage to pull off 10 wins, which I will be surprised about, but pleasantly surprised about, and will be happy to give them the credit where it is due. But even if that's the case, you still can't call it a full-on success yet, because then they have to prove it the next year, and then the next year, and then the next year. Because even as Stephen Ross said, the goal is sustained success, not just poking in every once in a while. And you also have to take into account that the playoffs have been expanded to 14 teams instead of 12. So that's almost half the fucking league at this point. And so it's less of a big deal to make the playoffs now than it would have been, like, let's say, last year. So that's also a factor in it. And we'll have to go into the evaluation as well. But personally, I think this team is going to be somewhere around 5 or 6 wins. I hope they prove me wrong, but it is their job to do so, and they don't get the credit from me until then. And I will be, voicing all of the concerns that I have until they prove that they are no longer a concern. So anyway, with that, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comments section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter @Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.